First through his transmission by an extraordinary master, in this case Milarepa himself, but also through the author's direct knowledge of the life, of Milarepa's life, as an incarnation of Milarepa himself. And this establishes two distinct, but I think interrelated literary frames within the text. So the inner frame forms the principal life story as an autobiographical reflection, a description of Milarepa's deeds as narrated by the Yogin himself, beginning with an account of his early life up to the time of his death. But then we have the text's outer frame, which includes the opening, the setting, and their subsequent narrative, as well as the description of the death scene itself. These suggest that the story is told through the voice of the madman as author and rapporteur, long after the Yogin's passing. Yet the story's inner and outer frame are closely related, and it is the text's introduction that defines the relationship between the two. By opening his work with the words, "Thus have I heard," Sanya Baruka is not merely mimicking the standard literary conceit of scriptural legitimation, he is in fact locating his own position vis-a-vis the text. So as biographer, the madman can claim to record the life as a witness to Milarepa's own words. As biographical subject, he speaks as the agent of the life himself. So I want to move towards some concluding remarks. So I've tried to outline here the process through which the madman took a biography that had become increasingly lifelike and effectively brought it to life. And he did so in a number of ways. Through positing his close association with Milarepa through visionary experience, but also through his direct identification as Milarepa himself. And he thereby gained an authoritative voice, presented as a self-reflection in first person, that then eclipsed some 4 centuries of previous textual production. The madman's work became the canonical version of the Yogin's life, and indeed it stands as the most famous and in fact the most successful attempt to write a sutra, that is a canonical Buddhist discourse in the Tibetan language, and with a Tibetan person in the role of the Buddha. And the result here is a text that is itself worthy of worship and veneration, much like that of a powerful saintly relic. Indeed, in his own colophon, the author extols its virtuous rewards gained by those who read the life of Milarepa, but also for those who hear it, who see it, who recollect it, who preserve it, and even touch it. And the pioneer of Buddhist studies, Etienne Lamotte, once noted that the writing of the life of the historical Buddha is a quote-unquote hopeless enterprise. And we can empathize with Lamotte's lament, much as we can with the dejected historian Antoine Roquentin's pursuit of his own biographical subject in Sartre's epistolary novel, Nanke. Despite the fact that he is commonly referred to as the historical Buddha, there's little that we can claim to know directly about the Shakya prince, be it the details of his life or the content of his teaching. And in a similar way, Milarepa left no record of his life. And slicing open the flesh of the madman's lifelike image, we're left with a dissected corpus of bewildering complexity, an organic network incorporating dozens, if not hundreds, of earlier biographical works. There's little apparent consensus among them, these earlier texts, regarding even the basic facts of the Yogin's life. Details of the places he traveled, the individuals he trained as disciples, the songs he sang, and even the dates of his life and death are all hotly disputed. So this is not to argue that such a thing as the historical Milarepa might not one day be exhumed, and indeed, an analysis, perhaps by means of a Milarepa seminar, comparing all of the narratives of each version might yield such a result. It would be understandable, though, if the practitioner of such an operation, having peeled away the flesh from the life story's corpus, felt as if the body had vanished, and like Sartre's Roquentin, was cast into a profound state of nausea. So to conclude here with a final anatomical metaphor, the principal aim of my project here has been a kind of extended autopsy on the corpus that the madman crafted, a body that he made despite the fact, or perhaps because, Milarepa left no corporeal relics. An autopsy is not always performed at the time of death, but rather only in the event of some unnatural occurrence, an untimely death, an accident, a murder. Some abnormality must have turned up within the biographical corpus. What is unnatural in the case of the madman's creation is precisely that it appears so natural, it appears to be so real. It seems so close to its subject, to the point of being its subject. And yet it is a work composed centuries after the subject's death. So what seems wrong then is that this late work, a work so mediated, could appear so immediate as to cast centuries of biographical traditions into obscurity. The purpose of this project is not to simply bring those forgotten traditions back into the light, although this is also one of its tasks, but to seek to understand why a work so late could seem so early, how a work so far removed from its subject could in fact claim the point of origin. In the end, calling this project a dissection, an autopsy, or a post-mortem might be a little misleading, since the body is not really dead. Calling it a vivisection would instead imply that the body was murdered in the process. So perhaps then it might be thought of as a kind of biographical MRI, a multi-layered analysis of a living being, for the corpus embodied in the madman's work certainly lives on. Milarepa did indeed live. He lived many lives, and remains a presence for the multitude of individuals who read his life story or see it performed by itinerant storytellers or bow their heads to its representation on a temple wall. He is continually born anew for modern-day meditators who invoke the yogin's presence through prayers and the consecration of statues and paintings, calling the master's presence from the pure realm in which he is thought to reside. The life of Milarepa transformed Tibet's geographic landscape, creating new centers of pilgrimage and establishing new paradigms for mapping and interpreting local topography. Milarepa's life now serves as a component for children's Tibetan language textbooks in contemporary Tibet, sanctioned by the Chinese authorities. Early translations of the life story carried it into fairly mainstream cross-sections of European and American culture. So the life of Milarepa has now been immortalized in several strip cartoons, numerous musical recordings, volumes of free verse, several novels, a French theatrical production, and the Italian silver screen. A new feature-length motion picture based on Milarepa's life and directed by a Tibetan incarnate Lama was screened at the 2006 Berlin Film Festival. In one of baseball's great hoaxes, renowned sports writer George Plimpton penned an article for Sports Illustrated describing the rookie player Sid Finch, whose incredible fastball was trained to his early tutelage under, quote-unquote, Tibet's great poet Saint Lama Milarepa. So for centuries after his death, authors have reimagined and rewritten versions of the yogin's life story, and those stories are his life. They form the corpus of narratives that embody his life, both as an individual who traversed the Buddhist path to enlightenment, and in the end, as an exemplar of how that might be accomplished. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you all very much. So, and I would be very happy to take your questions or comments. Yes?
So why exactly would you say that he needed to have something in, but why did he have a vision of Milarepa's life during Buddhism?
Well, this is difficult to say. There's no real contradiction between the two. In a sense, the Tulku tradition posits that a re-embodiment, a reincarnation, is in one sense the same person, but in another sense always needs to undergo training. So with the Dalai Lamas, when they discovered the new Dalai Lama, when the 14th Dalai Lama was discovered as a young boy, he still needed to be trained to fill the role of the Dalai Lama, right? To sort of establish himself as a valid teacher, as a legitimate teacher during that lifetime. And I think we see something of the same in the figure of Tonglen Garuga, where he undergoes this transformation into the madman, into this kind of mad saint himself, and has these kind of tremendous visionary experiences. That episode was one among dozens